There is a particular kind of haunting that has nothing to do with loss. A person you barely think to miss, someone who may not even occupy any real place in your daily life, suddenly appears uninvited, unexplained in the middle of a quiet afternoon, in the half-second before sleep, in the pause between one thought and the next. You do not summon them. They simply arrive, the way certain weather arrives, without asking permission. Why does the mind return again and again to people who no longer hold any obvious place in your life? Why does memory keep a room lit for someone who has long since left the house? Before we explore this together, subscribe to this channel where we uncover the hidden psychology behind everyday life. Imagine, for a moment, a house with many rooms, most of them familiar, well-lit, visited daily. But somewhere down a hallway you rarely walk, there is a door that never quite latches. You can close it, you can even forget it exists for weeks at a time, but a draft still slips through the gap, cool, faint, persistent, and every so often, without meaning to. You find yourself standing in front of it again, wondering what exactly is being kept in that room and why it refuses to stay shut. Carl Jung spent much of his life studying rooms like this, not literal ones, but the psychological chambers we build to store what we have not yet resolved. He believed that whatever remains unconscious in us does not simply vanish. It waits, and it resurfaces, often in the image of another person. But what if the person who keeps appearing in your thoughts is not who the thought is actually about? Consider the ones who tend to return uninvited. Rarely is it the people who loved you the way you needed to be loved, cleanly and completely. More often, it is the ones who left something unfinished, a conversation that ended too early, an apology that never arrived, a version of closeness that almost became something and then didn't. Why would the mind fixate on incompletion rather than on comfort? Perhaps because the mind, much like the body, is not built to leave wounds unattended. It circles back to what has not yet healed, the way a tongue keeps finding the edge of a broken tooth. Jung called the parts of ourselves we refuse to look at directly the shadow, not evil, not shameful in any simple sense, but simply unintegrated, unclaimed, unfinished business of the self. And here is the harder question worth sitting with. What if the person haunting your thoughts is not haunting you because of who they are, but because of what they represent, a part of your own story that has not yet been given a proper ending? Think of the ones who taught you, without meaning to, what you were willing to tolerate. The ones around whom you shrank slightly, or performed a version of yourself designed to be kept rather than truly known. Long after they are gone, the thought of them returns not necessarily because you miss them, but because some quieter part of you is still trying to understand what happened, still turning the moment over, searching for the sentence that would have made it make sense. But is that the whole explanation? Or is something else, older and less specific, moving beneath it? Alfred Adler believed that much of what drives us is a private, often invisible sense of striving toward significance, toward belonging, toward proving something to no one in particular. Certain people, without ever knowing it, become mirrors for that striving. You do not think of them because they were remarkable. You think of them because, in their presence, you once felt something about yourself you have not fully resolved, admired, dismissed, chosen, overlooked. The person becomes almost incidental. What lingers is the feeling they revealed in you. So why now? Why does a face from years ago surface on an ordinary Tuesday, with no clear trigger, no visible reason? Perhaps because certain emotional experiences are never actually filed away when they happen. They are filed away when they are understood. Until then, they remain active files, quietly open, waiting for a moment of stillness to resurface and ask, again, to be looked at properly. Picture the bare tree standing through a long winter, branches empty against a gray sky, appearing from a distance like something finished, something lost. But beneath the frozen surface of the ground, the roots continue their patient work, widening in the dark, preparing for a spring the tree cannot yet see and does not need to understand in order to keep growing. Is the tree's bareness truly emptiness? Or is it simply the visible cost of something invisible taking shape underground? The people who return uninvited to your thoughts may be doing something similar, not haunting you, but quietly working on you, from underground until whatever they represent has finally been integrated rather than merely remembered. This is the turn worth making gently. Here, in the middle of the story, what if the thought of them is not a symptom of something wrong, but a signal that something in you is still becoming? Jung named this long, uneven process individuation the slow work of assembling a self that is actually yours, rather than one shaped entirely by every room you have ever stood in and every person who has ever mattered to you. Individuation rarely feels like progress while it is happening. It tends to feel like confusion first, unfinished business second, and only much later, if you allow it, something closer to peace. So what do you do with a thought that keeps returning, uninvited, with no obvious use? This is where the observer becomes essential, the quiet witness inside you that can notice a memory without being pulled entirely back into it. Not the part of you that replays old conversations at midnight, rewriting what you should have said. The part that can simply notice, I am thinking of this person again, and feel the shape of that thought without needing to chase it toward resolution in the same instant. Marcus Aurelius, writing privately to himself centuries ago, returned often to a similar discipline, the practice of observing a disturbance in the mind without immediately becoming its subject. Can you feel the pull of a memory arriving and simply watch it arrive, the way you might watch weather move across a distant field? Can you let the thought exist without deciding it means something is unresolved or broken or wrong with you? And here is something worth noticing. If you are honest with yourself, this is very likely not the first time a person has occupied this exact place in your mind. Different face, different year, same particular ache, the same quality of longing, or unfinished conversation, or quiet, unresolved comparison. Why does life seem to send variations of the same figure through your thoughts, dressed differently each time, as though circling back to something you were meant to notice the first time and did not? Jung believed that what we do not make conscious will continue to appear in our lives disguised as circumstance, as coincidence, as the people who seem to arrive again and again wearing slightly different faces. Perhaps this is not really about the person currently occupying your thoughts. Perhaps it is the latest version of an older, unfinished question. What did I actually learn from what happened between us? And have I learned it yet? Or only survived it? Viktor Frankl, who studied meaning under circumstances few could imagine surviving, believed that between what happens to a person and how they respond, a space exists narrow, but real, and entirely their own. You cannot control whether a memory surfaces. But the space between its arrival and what you decide to do with it, examine it honestly, or bury it again unexamined, that space remains yours. So what would it actually look like to finally finish what these recurring thoughts are asking you to finish? Not something dramatic, not a grand confrontation or a message sent at 2 a.m. It might look like recalling someone difficult and noticing with some surprise that the memory no longer carries the same charge it once did. It might look like sitting with an old regret long enough to understand it, rather than long enough to simply feel bad again. It might look like realizing you no longer need the person to apologize, explain themselves, or even know that you thought of them at all. It might look like choosing understanding over resolution, accepting that some chapters end not with an answer, but with your own willingness to stop asking the same question of someone who was never going to answer it. None of this arrives with any particular fanfare. Jung once suggested that people will do almost anything to avoid facing the contents of their own mind, and if that is true, then simply being willing to look honestly at why someone keeps returning to your thoughts, rather than dismissing the thought the moment it appears, may already be a quiet form of courage. Return, for a moment, to that house and that door at the end of the hallway that never quite latches. Imagine walking toward it now, not to force it open, not to demand it explain itself, but simply to sit near it patiently, the way you might sit near an old friend who is finally ready to speak. Does the draft still feel like something threatening? Or does it simply feel, at last, like something familiar, something nearly finished? And so we return to the question, beneath all of this, beneath every uninvited memory, every face that resurfaces without explanation, every conversation replayed long after it has any practical use, what actually remains of you once the specific person is set aside, once their face is no longer the center of the thought, and only the lesson itself is left standing? What remains when you finally stop asking why they appeared, and start asking what they were always trying to show you? Jung offered an answer that has outlasted him by nearly a century. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Perhaps the people who will not leave your thoughts were never actually asking to be remembered. Perhaps they were only asking, quietly, patiently, across however many years it takes, to finally be understood. If this resonated, subscribe to this channel and join us as we keep uncovering these hidden truths. What is one person you find yourself still thinking about? And what do you think they were really here to teach you? Write it in the comments below, and let that door, wherever it stands in you, finally close on its own.